Before starting my own short film project, I researched and analysed conventions and features of short films, both inside and outside the post-apocalyptic genre. From this research, I established that a short film typically contains an individual narrative that has a shorter duration than a full feature-length film, varying from 1 minute to around 40 minutes, as established by the BFI. Due to their typically short production timescale and low production budget needs, these products suit the approaches of independent filmmakers who can use them to experiment with working within the film medium. There have been many recent technology developments in the contemporary film industry that have allowed independent filmmakers to easily produce, distribute, and view short films with little budget or connections. This has meant that the process of researching and watching various examples of short films of different genres, narrative structures and styles has been achievable throughout the process of this project. This wide diversity, however, has made defining the key conventions of short films more challenging, as every short is distinctly different to the next in many ways. To aid in my understanding, I watched and analysed several short films, including Awake, Alone, Paper Aeroplanes and Dead Zone, in depth. These examples aided me in identifying some conventions and effective aspects of short films. For example, from these films I was able to recognise that successful short films tend to focus on one character's unusual experiences that intrigue the viewer and allow them to identify with the protagonist strongly. These protagonists are also commonly presented as ordinary people, which easily allows the audience to immerse and relate to the character and the narrative of the short without much prior knowledge. This is an effective aspect in terms of a short film, due to its limited duration in which the character can be established. I found that the audience's personal connection was frequently enhanced through the utilisation of verisimilitude and handheld shots, which further immerse the viewer into the film. I also established that many short films utilise unconventional shot types and mystery at various points in the narrative to interest and keep the viewer engaged throughout the duration of the short, particularly at the start of the film. Additionally, the sound, including the score, dialogue and sound effects, is used throughout the short film to immediately highlight and establish its tone, atmosphere and genre, portraying original narratives and utilising new ideas, alongside all of the features mentioned before, I have found make it successful and effective short film. As I decided on the post-apocalyptic theme of my film before conducting my short film research, most of the films that I analysed were within the post-apocalyptic genre. This meant that I was able to identify some conventions of post-apocalyptic short films, which I utilised in my own short film. As I mentioned before, the majority of the short films that I analysed focused on one protagonist due to the genre of the films. Additionally, many manipulated take length and use of score to portray a tense tone and atmosphere. This initial research revealed that engaging and successful short films are frequently thought-provoking and focus on a single protagonist. From the beginning of this project, I also ensured to conform to the conventions of a short film, as my film, Left Behind, easily fits within the timescale of a short film by stretching to only 5 minutes and 15 seconds long. My product also contains a unique standalone narrative that begins and concludes within the production, meaning that the film can be watched without any prior knowledge. The narrative is also focused around a single protagonist and his experiences, as the audience experience the narrative through this character. I have also ensured to include a typical family structure within the narrative to allow the majority of people to engage and relate with the film. Additionally, I have ensured to utilise a variety of shot types, camera angles and camera movements to aid in engaging the viewer with the production. For example, I utilised an establishing shot of an isolated location at the beginning of my short film, in reference to the post-apocalyptic film I Am Legend, which also utilises this technique extensively in its opening sequence to immediately establish the setting and theme of the film. I also utilised handheld camera movement to portray disorientation and uneasiness, which is also used in the short post-apocalyptic film Dead Zone, and also in the short film Alone. Additionally, I have manipulated take length to alter the pace of certain scenes to either portray a tense or calmer atmosphere depending on the action on screen. This is also utilised in Dead Zone to portray the change in tone. Technically, it can be argued that my production adheres to many conventions of a short film. While planning and producing my short film, I was inspired by the post-apocalyptic film I Am Legend from 2007, which featured the protagonist in search of a cure for a virus that has devastated mankind. This film utilises isolated locations to portray the extent of the protagonist's isolation and pace manipulation according to the storyline. This film also influenced the main storyline point of my film, which included a killer virus that only the protagonist is immune to. The most influential short films that I analysed were Alone and Dead Zone. The short film Alone heavily influenced the development of the ending of my own production, as this film utilises a sudden ending that leaves the audience in suspense and with unanswered questions. I found this to be particularly effective and utilised a similar concept in my own short film. The short film Dead Zone influenced the score and pace manipulation of my short film. The score used in Dead Zone changes in tone and pace depending on the action on screen to portray a frequently tense and fast-paced sequence. This film demonstrated the importance of the score in portraying the atmosphere to the audience, a convention that I paid close attention to in my own production. Coupled with this, the film also controls take length to manipulate the pace of the film according to the action. In addition to my short film, I also researched and established the conventions of a film poster and film review to aid me in producing my ancillary projects. I defined the conventions of post-apocalyptic film posters by researching and analysing feature-length film posters such as I Am Legend, The Road, The Book of Eli, and particularly 28 Days Later from 2002. From this research, I could establish the shared features in the design, content, and layout of these posters, which I could utilise in my own film poster. One of the conventions that I identified was that film posters of this theme commonly only include the protagonist in the main image of the poster, which reflects the theme of the film effectively and clearly and initially introduces the character to the audience. I also found that film posters of this subgenre typically include an isolated location that features within the film, which also aids in immediately establishing the genre and introducing the setting of the film to the audience. From the film poster research, I was able to also identify the general conventions of a film poster regarding the inclusion of a film title, tagline, billing block, release date, film website, and the actors' names. On the other hand, for my film review, I closely referenced the layout and style of the esteemed film magazine, Empire. I thoroughly analysed and established the conventions of a typical film review in the magazine, and gained understanding of the language and layout utilised. I followed all of the conventions to the best of my ability, which meant that there was little creative freedom, as adding additional features to the layout and style would have detracted from the credibility of my product.